While holidaying in England in 1994, Gillian took Marjorie and Noel to see magnificent Lincoln. The busy modern city of Lincoln is the capital of Lincolnshire and had its beginnings in an Iron Age settlement in the 1st century BC. This original settlement was built by a deep pool, now known as the Brayford Pool, in the River Witham, at the foot of a large hill, on which the Normans later built the magnificent Lincoln Cathedral and Lincoln Castle. The Romans conquered this part of Britain in 48 AD, and shortly afterwards built a legionary fortress high on a hill overlooking the natural lake formed by the widening of the River Witham, which of course is the modern-day Brayford Pool, and at the northern end of the Fosse Way, the Roman road built in AD 46. It became a settlement for Roman army veterans in 71 AD. This gradually spread down the hillside to the waterside below, which gradually became a major flourishing settlement, accessible from the sea both through the River Trent and through the River Witham, and became the capital of the Roman Flavia Sigurensis, when the province of Britannia Inferior was subdivided in the early 4th century. During this period, the Latin name became Linsaline. This magnificent Norman house, dated from 1170 to 1180, is mistakenly known as Aaron the Jew's house. Note that the first floor window has been reset and restored. After the first destructive Viking raids, the city rose to some importance with overseas trading connections, and Lincoln became a trading centre of some importance. After the establishment of what was known as the Dane Law in 886, Lincoln became one of the 5 boroughs of the East Midlands. By the year 950, Lincoln had developed into a quite significant trading city, and in 1068, 2 years after the Norman conquest, William I ordered Lincoln Castle to be built on the site of the former Roman settlement, for the strategic reasons which would give him control of the road north. Construction of the first Lincoln Cathedral was completed in 1092 and later rebuilt after a fire, but was destroyed by an unusual earthquake in 1185. The rebuilt Lincoln Cathedral was on a really immense scale, with a spire 525 feet high, the largest in Europe. When completed, the central of its 3 spires exceeded that of the Great Pyramids of Egypt, as the tallest man-made structure in the world at that time. Lincoln had become so significant that when Magna Carta was drawn up in 1215, one of the witnesses was the Bishop of Lincoln, leading to one of only 4 surviving originals of that document being preserved in Lincoln Castle. During the war between England and Normandy in 1141, Lincoln was the site of a battle between King Stephen and the forces of Empress Matilda. But by 1150, Lincoln was among the wealthiest towns in all of England, exporting cloth and wool to Flanders, and especially fine dyed Lincoln cloth in shades of scarlet and green, the reputation of which was later enhanced by Robin Hood, wearing woolens of Lincoln green. Lincoln was home to one of the 5 most important Jewish communities in England, well established before it was officially noted in 1154. But in 1190, anti-Semitic riots that started in King's Lynn in Norfolk spread to Lincoln, and the Jewish community took refuge with royal officials, but their habitations were plundered. The so-called House of Aaron, which still survives, has a 2-story street frontage that is essentially 12th century, and a nearby Jew's house likewise bears witness to the Jewish population. But subsequent unrest led to the Jews being expelled en masse in 1290. During the 13th century, Lincoln was the 3rd largest city in England and was favoured by more than one king. and became caught up in the strife between the king and the rebel barons who had allied themselves with the French. It was in Lincoln and at Dover that the French and rebel armies were defeated, and in the aftermath of the battle, Lincoln was pillaged for having sided with Prince Louis of France, and in the 14th century the city's fortunes began to decline. Between 1642 and 1651, during the English Civil War, Lincoln was on the frontier between the Royalist and Parliamentary forces, and changed hands several times, with many buildings being badly damaged, and with Lincoln's major industry now denied access to the sea. But by the Georgian era, Lincoln's fortunes began to pick up, thanks in part to the agricultural revolution then in train. And the reopening of the Fosse-Dyke Canal allowed coal and other raw materials vital to industry to be more easily brought into the city. As Lincoln boomed again during the Industrial Revolution, and the city began to excel in heavy engineering, building locomotives, steam shuttles and the like. In 1904, Lincoln was hit with a very serious typhoid epidemic. This led to a world first, chlorination of the water supply, being one of the first known uses of this chemical to disinfect the water supply. In both World Wars, Lincoln switched to war production. The first ever tanks were invented, designed and built in Lincoln by William Foster and Company during the First World War, and during the Second World War, Lincoln produced a vast array of war goods from tanks, aircraft, munition and military vehicles. Post-war, Lincoln's industrial base declined quite rapidly, and its economy is now based mainly on public administration, commerce, arable farming and tourism. This is the downhill part of Lincoln today, showing the 18th century high bridge and the glory hole for the River Witham to go under it. But now it's time to head uphill again to see Lincoln's crowning glory, the magnificent Lincoln Cathedral. So, let's go. Heading uphill is much harder than going down because these streets are really steep. And it's time for a quick snack, and maybe an ale or two. After all, there's a lot of hard work yet, heading uphill, and of course to tour the magnificent cathedral. When you first get close to the cathedral, the size and bulk of it is quite breathtaking. Like all cathedrals, it is always under maintenance. The work that goes into maintaining it is there to see, huge scaffolding everywhere. But with such a magnificent building, it is essential that maintenance be constantly ongoing and effective. The size of the structure is truly awesome, and it needed many different shots from the camera to take it all in. And this is only one side of this huge building. There's lots more yet to come. The immense size of this portal gives some feeling for the scale of the building. But this is only one of the many portals, and the scale of the building once inside is quite beyond belief. Experts in church architecture rave about the amazing detail throughout the structure, and without doubt this tower gives some inkling of the amazing amount of work that went into its creation. Once inside, the scale of the church is quite immense, and the quality of its structure becomes ever more apparent. Fortuitously, our visit found a volunteer guide about to start a very long tour of all the church's features, so we tacked onto the group. Unfortunately, she had a very quiet voice, and in this echoing cavern of a church, her words were almost impossible to hear. But she did have a lamp with her, whereby she projected its beam onto the features she was then describing. And describe she did, highlighting almost every tiny feature, such as gargoyles and recessions, which she regarded as rather important and things we should see, but sadly couldn't hear her explanation of them. Perhaps the most surprising thing was just how much there was to see in this vast cathedral. As we moved from the huge central cavern of the cathedral into many other areas branching off at right angles, with each of them revealing remarkable new architectural features with extraordinarily fine detail, which we were told was better and more finely done than the detail in any other cathedral in England, and is regarded as the architectural marvel of its time. Here are some of the organ pipes, with others being placed elsewhere in the cathedral, to give a fullness of sound throughout the whole structure. I guess there may be some bias here, but the guide claimed that the purity of sound in the cathedral was regarded as being better than that in any other cathedral in Europe. Of course, we've heard that claim in almost all the other cathedrals we have visited all over Europe over the years, and certainly the sound we're about to hear, with an organist apparently practicing his or her skills on the keyboard, did seem to make the guide's claims a little bit extreme. This huge but rather gloomy statue dominating this part of the cathedral was apparently to remember Edward King, who was Bishop of Lincoln between 1885 and 1910. This is one of the three main towers of the cathedral, at the junction between the main hall of the cathedral and one of the equally large side chapels. This shot ideally shows just how massive the columns which supported the roof were, but the true bulk of the column has been nicely concealed by the tiny fluted columns surrounding the main one. There certainly was a smart architect at work here. The unique design and structural complexity of the cathedral apparently permitted some very large windows, and many of them, which made good use of medieval stained glass skill. Our guide went to considerable pains to point out the fine detail in this very heavily decorated cathedral, but of course we couldn't hear a word of what she was saying about them.
Talks too much, I should guess. Lovely little town. You really need to spend hours looking at this. A lot of it, they mix their things that was a queen, and then there's a king. That was the king. He's in a tunic and skirt. And there's a queen in the long flowing gown. And Mr. Pink was asked the cathedral architects in 1756 to put the heads back on them. And he didn't look to see how they were dressed. He made them all into bishops with beards. So the women are the same as the men here, bishops and mitres and beards. You see all the way along. It's rather lovely, isn't it?
She told us how there had been constant repairs conducted over the centuries, sometimes much better than others, and mentioning, for instance, in the previous shot, that new male and female heads had been placed on the wrong figures. And had she not told us, I'm sure none of us would have noticed.
And those are called copies. Now, if you look on the end, you can see very clearly how they got the tool work. See the beds that they could carve it. That the people from Lincoln went to Chester, because Chester Cathedral, the marking of the stone is very similar way it's been done. And travel from one cathedral to the other. I don't know if anyone's read that one before. They get the leg out and and then the arms come up.
The practicing organist was pretty awful, and sadly, the organ simply drowned out everything the guide was trying to tell us. So it was nice that the noise stopped long enough to let us dwell briefly onto more of the wonderful medieval stained glass in these huge windows. Here lies Robert Grosseteste, Bishop of Lincoln from 1235 to 1253. For a moment we thought the awful organ music had actually stopped for a while, but it was not to be, I'm afraid. It's about to start again, but maybe slightly better this time. And finally, the organ music ceased, to allow us to have a quiet look at this rather remarkable stained glass window, apparently showing a local scholar of some note. And of course there is always work to be done, dusting down this burial place and elaborate coffin of some notable in the cathedral's long history. I didn't find out the reason for the elaborate decoration of this window, which is quite remarkable. And apparently, the organist is now back from his comfort break. Oh well, we did have a little bit of respite. Despite everything, it had been a wonderful visit to historic Lincoln Cathedral, and we now knew why it was so highly rated as a true gem of ecclesiastical architecture and structure. An amazing building. But that's all for now of this glimpse of the magnificent city of Lincoln and its gem on the hill. Bye for now.